They say blood is thicker than water, but in my mother's kitchen, blood is just another stain to be bleached away before the cameras start rolling. For years, I was the ghost in the pantry, the silent architect of a culinary empire I wasn't allowed to inhabit. But tonight, as I stand in the shadows of the world's most prestigious kitchen, I'm no longer the girl who couldn't fry an egg. I am the one holding the fire. My name is Alara Vance. To the 5 million followers of Mama Vera's Vintage Kitchen, I don't exist. Or rather, I exist only as a punchline, the clumsy, talentless daughter who supposedly burns water and lives off takeout. To the world, my mother, Vera Vance, is a self-made culinary queen. The woman who rediscovered the soul of home cooking. But here is the truth. Seasoned with the salt of 1,000 tears, every original recipe that made her famous, every secret spice blend that sold out in minutes, and every viral technique she claimed as a stroke of genius. They were all mine. It started when I was 12. My mother was a struggling real estate agent with a fading smile and a mounting pile of bills. I, on the other hand, found my sanctuary in the kitchen. While other kids were playing tag, I was balancing the acidity of a reduction and studying the Maillard reaction. One afternoon, I made a lavender-infused honey cake for a bake sale. Mum took a photo of it, posted it online, and the comments went wild. "Vera, you're a genius." They screamed. She didn't correct them. She just looked at me, a look that was part desperation and part cold calculation, and said, "Alara, honey, if we tell them it was you, nobody will take it seriously. You're just a kid. Let mommy handle the public. And you just keep ... creating. It's for the family." For the family became my prison sentence. By 19, I was working 18-hour days in a home basement, which had been converted into a high-end test kitchen. I developed the menus, I wrote the scripts, and I prepped the ingredients until my fingers were scarred from blades and heat. Then, the lights would go on. The cameras would hum, and Vera would sweep in, glowing in her designer apron, to perform the final flip or sprinkle for her audience. The breaking point didn't come from the exhaustion. It came from the humiliation. It was the night of the Golden Whisk livestream, her biggest event yet. She was making my signature pan-seared scallops with saffron pea puree. I was crouched behind the counter, out of sight, handing her the pre-chilled butter at the exact microsecond she needed it. A fan asked in the live chat, "Does your daughter ever help you in the kitchen? She must be a pro by now." Vera laughed, that melodic, fake chime that made my skin crawl. She looked directly into the lens and sighed dramatically. "Oh, bless her heart, Alara. My poor girl can't even fry an egg without starting a fire. She's purely a cereal and toast kind of person. I've tried to teach her, I really have, but some people just aren't born with the gift. She stays in her room and leaves the real work to me." The chat filled with lols and poor Vera. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that no oven could warm. I looked at my hands, red, blistered, and smelling of garlic and expensive saffron. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, using my soul to buy her fame while burying my identity in the dirt. That night, while she was celebrating her record-breaking viewership with a bottle of vintage crystal, I packed one suitcase. I didn't take clothes. I took my knives, the ones I'd bought with saved lunch money, and my handwritten journals filled with 10 years of culinary alchemy. I left a single note on the marble island. "Since I can't fry an egg, I'm going to see if I can find someone who will teach me. Don't look for me. Your kitchen is empty now." I walked out into the rain, leaving the vintage kitchen behind. I had no money, no degree, and no name. All I had was a palate that could identify a single grain of rogue white pepper in a gallon of stock, and a rage that burned hotter than a blue flame. I spent the next decade as a ghost. I moved to France, changed my last name to my grandmother's maiden name, and worked my way up from the very bottom. I washed dishes in greasy bistros until my nails bled. I peeled sacks of onions in the dark until my eyes stopped stinging. I slept on flour sacks in the back of bakeries. I never watched her videos. I didn't need to. I could hear her voice in the back of my head every time I plated a dish. "You have no gift. You are nothing." But the world began to disagree. They called me the alchemist. They said my food didn't just taste good. It told stories of lost things and found strength. I earned my first Michelin star at 24. My second at 27. By 30, I was the youngest woman to hold 3 stars in the history of the guide. I never did interviews. I never showed my face. I was the shadow chef, the mystery of the culinary world. Then, the invitation came. The Global Culinary Crown, the biggest televised cooking competition in history. They wanted me as the head judge for the grand finale. I looked at the list of finalists, and there it was. A name that tasted like ash and betrayal, Vera Vance. She had struggled after I left. Her new recipes were erratic, pale imitations of my old work. Her ratings were dropping. This show was her last-ditch effort to prove she was still the queen. I sat in my office in Paris, looking at the contract. I picked up my pen. It was time for the world to see what happens when the girl who couldn't fry an egg finally decides to serve the truth. And I was going to serve it cold. The studio lights of the Global Culinary Crown were blinding, a synthetic sun that promised glory to some and total exposure to others. From the high-tech observation room, a glass box, suspended above the main kitchen arena, I watched the finalists prepare for the semi-final round, down there. Among the gleaming stainless steel and the frantic assistants was Vera Vance. She looked older than I remembered, though her face was pulled tight by expensive procedures and her hair was a perfect, frozen wave of platinum blonde. She was wearing her trademark Mama Vera apron, but her hands, they were shaking. Just a fraction. Only someone who had spent a decade watching those hands would notice. She was out of her depth, and we both knew it. The ratings for Vera are through the roof, my executive producer, Marcus, said, leaning against the glass. People love a comeback story. The matriarch of the kitchen fighting for her crown. But her food lately ... It's missing the spark, don't you think, chef? I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes fixed on her as she struggled to emulsify a basic hollandaise. It's missing more than a spark, Marcus. It's missing a soul. Well, that's why you're here, he chuckled. The mysterious chef Elara Raven Rossi, the woman whose palate can detect a lie. You're the final boss. Nobody knows it's you yet. We're keeping your identity under wraps until the very last second of the finale. The suspense is driving the internet crazy. I adjusted the collar of my black chef's jacket. To the world, I was Elara Rossi. I had taken my grandmother's name and built a wall around my past. To Vera, I was a ghost. A failure who had vanished into the night 10 years ago. The challenge today was childhood reimagined. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. I watched Vera through the monitors. She decided to make a deconstructed apple tart, a dish I had perfected when I was 16. I remembered the night I created it. I had burned my wrist on the sugar work, and instead of a bandage, she had handed me a whisk and told me to finish the batch because the lighting for the photo shoot was just right on the screen. Vera was speaking to a roaming camera, her voice dripping with that rehearsed maternal sweetness. This dish represents my heart, she told the interviewer, blinking back before muddy tears. I used to make this for my daughter when she was little. She didn't have much of a palate, poor thing, but she loved the smell of my baking. It's a tribute to the family bond that transcends even the most difficult times. A surge of nausea hit me. She wasn't just stealing my work anymore. She was weaponizing my absence to gain sympathy. She was painting herself as the long-suffering mother of a difficult, untalented child. Chef, Marcus asked, noticing my white knuckles. You okay? Fine, I bit out. I just want to taste what heart tastes like when it's stolen. When the tasting session began, I stayed in the shadows of the judging panel. The other two judges, a harsh Italian critic named Fabio and a bubbly pastry expert named Yuki, did the public talking. I sat at the end of the long table, my face obscured by the dramatic lighting and the high collar of my jacket. I didn't speak. I simply took notes. Vera approached the table, her plate trembling slightly. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? I had lost weight, changed my hair, and gained a coldness in my eyes that she had never bothered to look deep enough to see. This is my nostalgia tart, Vera beamed, placing the plate before us. Cinnamon-infused Granny Smith apples, a salted caramel dust, and a crust that melts like a memory. Fabio took a bite. It's classic, a bit dated, perhaps. The technique is traditional, but it feels like it's stuck in 2014. It's a vintage recipe. Vera laughed nervously. The classics never die. Then it was my turn. The camera zoomed in on my hand as I picked up the silver fork. I took a tiny piece of the crust and a smear of the apple compote. I didn't need to chew to know what was wrong. She had used store-bought puff pastry, high quality. but not handmade. The cinnamon was stale, likely from a jar that had been sitting in her studio kitchen for too long. But the bigger sin, she had forgotten the lemon zest in the apple soak. It was the secret step I had invented to keep the sweetness from becoming cloying. Without it, the dish was flat, dull. I pushed the plate away. I didn't say a word. I just wrote a single number on my scorecard and slid it over to the floor manager. /10. The look of shock on Vera's face was priceless. She was used to being told she was a legend. She looked toward my shadowed figure, trying to see my face. May I ask? What the head judge found lacking? I've served this dish to world leaders. I leaned forward just enough for the light to hit my mouth, but not my eyes. My voice was a low, controlled rasp. A world leader doesn't know the difference between vintage and lazy. Vera, you're relying on a ghost to do your cooking, but the ghost has moved on. You're lucky to still be in the competition. She flinched. The use of her first name, the coldness of my tone, it rattled her. She retreated from the stage, her composure cracking like an overbaked meringue. That night, the internet exploded. Who is Chef Rossi? Why does she hate Mama Vera? I sat in my hotel room, looking at an old photo I kept in the back of my wallet. It was a picture of me at 14, standing behind Vera while she held a trophy I had won for her. I was blurred, out of focus, just a shadow in the background. One more week. Mother, I whispered to the empty room. One more week until the finale. You wanted the world to see your talent. I'm going to make sure they see every bit of it. Or rather, the lack of it. I pulled out my notebook and began to design the final challenge. It wouldn't be about technique. It wouldn't be about trends. It would be about truth. I was going to force her to cook the one dish she claimed I could never master, the humble egg, but I wasn't going to make it easy. I was going to ask for a spherical omelette with truffle air and chive essence, a dish that required absolute precision, perfect heat control, and a deep understanding of molecular chemistry. It was a dish I had spent 3 years perfecting in Paris, a dish she didn't even know existed. The trap was set. The queen was about to realize that her throne was built on sand, and the tide was finally coming in. The week leading up to the grand finale was a fever dream of flashing bulbs and high-stakes rehearsals. My mother was unraveling, and to everyone else, it looked like creative passion. To me, it looked like a fraud realizing the ink was disappearing from her cheat sheet. I watched her from the security monitors in the producer's lounge. She was in the practice kitchen, surrounded by a team of 3 assistants. She was trying to recreate a complex lobster bisque, one of the recipes from my old journals. But she was missing the nuance. She kept overjuicing the stock, turning a delicate melody of the sea into a screeching salt balm. No, 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 she screamed, throwing a whisk across the room. It clattered against the stainless steel, a harsh sound that echoed my own childhood. It doesn't taste right. The recipe is wrong. Who wrote these notes? An assistant trembled. Ma'am, these are the notes from your 2018 cookbook. Your bestseller. Vera froze. She stared at the paper, and for a second, I saw the flicker of realization. She didn't have me to adjust the seasoning on the fly anymore. She didn't have my nose to tell her when the mirepoix was perfectly translucent. She was a pianist who had forgotten how to read music, standing in front of a sold-out stadium. I sipped my black coffee, feeling a cold, clinical detachment. I wasn't happy to see her suffer. I was just satisfied to see the laws of physics finally applied to her life. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Her action was theft. This was the reaction, Chef Rossi. I turned. It was Marcus. He looked ecstatic. The hype is unbearable. We've had 100,000 tweets in the last hour alone. People are calling you the Ice Queen. They want to know why you're so hard on Vera Vance. Are you ready for the press conference? I'm ready for the truth. Marcus, I said, putting on my sunglasses. The press can have whatever's left. The press conference was a battlefield. Vera sat at the long table, dressed in a soft, lilac suit meant to make her look approachable and victimized. I sat at the far end, my face still partially obscured by a designer visor and the shadow of the podium. Chef Rossi, a reporter from Culinary Monthly, called out, "You've been remarkably critical of Vera Vance, a woman who paved the way for home cooks everywhere. Some say you're being unnecessarily harsh. Is there a personal bias here?" I leaned into the microphone. The room went silent. "My bias is toward excellence," I said. my voice cutting through the air like a deboning knife. Vera Vance sells a fantasy. She sells the idea that cooking is just about love and motherly instinct. But professional cooking is about discipline, chemistry, and honesty. When I taste her food, I don't taste love. I taste a script. I taste someone who hasn't evolved in a decade. Vera grabbed the microphone, her eyes glistening with fake tears. I've always said that cooking is a journey. And yes, I lost my way for a while after my daughter. After she left, it broke my heart. She was my inspiration, even if she couldn't boil an egg. I cook for her now, hoping she's out there somewhere, eating well. The room erupted in oars. My hands balled into fists under the table. She was using me as a prop again. I was her tragic backstory, the missing piece that explained her current failures. If your daughter is watching, I said, my voice dropping an octave, perhaps she's not looking for your tribute. Perhaps she's looking for your apology. Vera looked toward me, her eyes narrowing. For a split second, a flash of recognition crossed her face, a memory of a tone, a way of standing. But she dismissed it. In her mind, I was still the clumsy girl in a messy apron, not the powerhouse in the black chef's coat. I have nothing to apologize for, Vera whispered, her microphone still live. I gave her everything. I even gave her my name. No, I thought. You took mine. The final challenge was announced that evening. The mastery of the simple. The contestants were told they would have to prepare 3 courses. But the centerpiece, the dish, that would determine the winner would be a single perfect egg dish. I went back to the kitchen after the lights were dimmed. I picked up a copper pan and an egg. With a flick of my wrist, I cracked it. One hand, clean, no shell. I whisked it with a fork, the rhythm steady and hypnotic. I poured it into the pan, moved it with surgical precision, and within 60 seconds, I had a French omelette pale gold, no browning, shaped like a perfect silk cocoon. I took a bite. It was simple. It was honest. It was something Vera Vance had never achieved in 50 years because she was too busy looking at the camera to look at the pondod. As I left the studio, I passed the Hall of Fame wall. There was a giant portrait of Vera, smiling with a tray of cookies. I took a permanent marker from my pocket and wrote a single word on the glass over her face. Plagiarist. Tomorrow, the world would see the finale. Tomorrow, the Ice Queen would take off the mask. And tomorrow, Vera Vance would find out that the egg she claimed I couldn't fry was about to hatch into a dragon. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours sharpening my knives. The metal shrieked against the whetstone, a beautiful, violent sound. I wasn't just preparing for a show. I was preparing for an exorcism. The morning of the finale felt like the air before a lightning strike. The studio was a hive of activity, cameramen checking angles, light technicians adjusting the spots to be even harsher, and the audience filing in with an appetite for drama that exceeded their appetite for food. In my dressing room, I stared at my reflection. I had ditched the visor. I had ditched the high collar. Today, I was wearing my official Myla Ouvrier de France jacket, the one with the tricolour collar that only the absolute elite of the culinary world are permitted to wear. It was a badge of war. 5 minutes. Chef Rossi, a production assistant, whispered, knocking on the door. I grabbed my roll of knives. I didn't need them to cook today, but I needed them near me. They were the only things that had never lied to me. As I walked onto the set, the roar of the crowd was deafening. The 3 finalists stood at their stations. There was a young rising star from Tokyo, a bold experimentalist from Mexico City, and then there was Vera. She was wearing a pristine white apron with Mama Vera embroidered in gold thread. She looked confident, waving to her fans in the front row. But when I stepped into the light and took my seat at the center of the judging panel, her hand froze midair. I wasn't hiding anymore. I sat tall, my eyes locked onto hers. I saw the moment the gears shifted in her head. She looked at my face, then at the tricolour collar, then back to my eyes. The colour drained from her cheeks, leaving her heavy makeup looking like a cracked mask of grey clay. Welcome to the grand finale, I said into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. Today, we strip away the garnishes. We strip away the stories and the branding. Today, we judge the soul of the chef. The first 2 courses were a blur of technical brilliance from the other 2 contestants. The Japanese chef served a sea urchin chawanmushi that was like silk. The Mexican chef delivered a mole that had 42 layers of flavor. Then came Vera. She served a classic roasted lamb with rosemary reduction. It was my recipe. Chapter 4 of the notebook I had written when I was 17. As she placed the plate in front of me, she leaned in, her voice a desperate, frantic whisper that the microphones barely caught. Alaric, is that ... Is that really you? My guy, you've changed. Why didn't you tell me? We can fix this. Think of the brand, darling. We could be the biggest duo in the world. I didn't even blink. I picked up my fork, tasted the lamb, and immediately spat it into a napkin. The audience gasped. The camera zoomed in on the half-chewed meat. The fat hasn't been rendered, I said coldly, loud enough for the back row to hear. The rosemary's burnt, making the sauce bitter. And the meat is cold in the center. You're playing a part, Vera, but you've forgotten the lines. I was just nervous, she stammered, her eyes darting toward the cameras. Seeing my daughter after all these years. It's a miracle. I am not your daughter today, I replied, my voice like a guillotine. I am the head judge, and you are a contestant who is failing. The host, sensing the ratings gold, jumped in. It's time for the final, deciding dish. The theme, the humble egg. You have 30 minutes to show us mastery. Start. Now, the countdown began. The other two chefs moved with the grace of dancers. But Vera ... Vera was spiraling. She knew she couldn't do the complex molecular dishes the others were attempting. She decided to go for what she thought was her safest bet, my signature soufflé-style omelette. I watched her crack the eggs. She did it clumsily, getting a piece of shell in the bowl. She fished it out with her finger, a cardinal sign in a Michelin-level kitchen. She over-whisked. She let the pan get to heart. The smell of browning butter, not nutty, but burnt, wafted toward the judging table. She was sweating. The sweat dripped from her forehead near the bowl. She looked up at me, pleading with her eyes. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to jump down there, take the pan, and fix it like I used to do when the red light of the camera was about to turn on. I sat back and crossed my arms. I watched her struggle with the very thing she told 5 million people I couldn't do. 10 minutes. The host shouted. Vera tried to flick the omelette. It tore. The yellow liquid spilled across the pan like a messy crime scene. She tried to fold it over to hide the tear, but it was too late. The texture was rubbery, the shape was lopsided, and the Mama Vera charm was nowhere to be found. Time is up. Chefs, present your dishes. The Tokyo chef presented a golden sphere. An egg yolk can fit inside a transparent isomalt shell. It was perfect. The Mexican chef presented huevos divinos, a deconstructed masterpiece of spice and texture. Then, it was Vera's turn. She walked toward the table as if she were walking to the gallows. She placed the plate in front of me. The omelette was bruised, weeping watery moisture, and smelled of scorched butter. I looked at the plate. Then I looked at her. This, I said, pointing at the mess, is what you told the world I was capable of. For 10 years, you used my name to build a lie and used my absence to build a tragedy. But look at this plate. Vera, look at it. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. You haven't learned a single thing since I left, I continued. You didn't just steal my recipes. You stole my youth. And yet, after all that time, you can't even fry a simple egg. Elara, please, she whispered, her face crumbling. I'm your mother. I picked up the scorecard. I didn't even need to taste it. The smell was enough. In the kitchen, I said, looking directly into the main camera lens, there is no mother, there is only the plate. And this plate is a lie. The silence in the studio was heavy, suffocating like a kitchen with a broken extractor fan. Vera stood there, her hands clutching the edge of the judging table. I could see the sweat beads breaking through her expensive foundation. She looked like a cornered animal, but instead of baring teeth, she went for the only weapon she had left, pity. How could you? She sobbed, her voice amplified by the lapel mic. How could you humiliate your own mother like this on global television? I gave you life. I gave you a roof over your head. Everything I built for our future. I stood up. I didn't yell. My voice was a cold, steady stream of liquid nitrogen. You didn't build it for our future, Vera. You built it for your ego. You built it on the back of a teenager who worked until her hands bled while you were busy picking out which designer watch to buy with the sponsorship money from recipes you didn't even understand. I reached into my chef's jacket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. It was my first one, the one with the flour-stained cover, and the handwriting of a 14-year-old girl. I opened it to a specific page and turned it toward the cameras. "This is the recipe for the nostalgia tart you served in the semi-finals," I said. "Look at the date. July 14th, 2016. It's written in my hand. It has my notes on the margin about adding lemon zest to balance the Granny Smiths, the very step you forgot today because you never actually learned the why behind the how." The audience began to murmur. I could see the producers in the wings, frantically talking into their headsets. This wasn't just a cooking show anymore. It was an execution of a reputation. And this, I pointed to the pathetic, weeping omelette on the plate before me. "This is a recipe from 10 years ago. It's my beginner's gold omelette. I wrote it for you because you couldn't keep up with the more complex dishes. And yet ... I picked up a fork and pushed the rubbery mass across the porcelain. ... You still failed. You haven't evolved. You haven't practiced. You've just been a parasite, feeding on the ghost of the daughter you told the world was incompetent." Vera looked at the judges, searching for an ally. Fabio looked away, disgusted. Yuki was busy staring at the evidence in my notebook. "I made you who you are." Vera shrieked, her maternal facade finally shattering. "You would be nothing without my platform. You were just a kid in a basement. I made those recipes famous." "You made the brand famous," I corrected her. "I made the food real. And today, the food is all that matters." I looked at the other judges. "I think we've seen enough." We turned our chairs for a brief, whispered deliberation. It wasn't even a debate. The Tokyo chef was a master. The Mexican chef was an artist. Vera Vance was a shoplifter in a chef's coat. When we turned back, the host was trembling with excitement. "Chef Rossi, your verdict for the third finalist?" I looked Vera straight in the eyes. I wanted her to feel the weight of every hour I spent alone in that basement kitchen. I wanted her to feel the cold of every night I spent in Paris wondering if I was actually as talentless as she told the world I was. "Vera Vance," I said, my voice echoing through the rafters. "This is my recipe from a decade ago. It was a dish meant for a student, and you haven't even reached that level. You are a fraud, and your kitchen is officially closed. You are disqualified. Get off my stage." The Mama Vera apron seemed to shrink on her. She didn't move for a long moment, then she turned and ran. She didn't go to the exit. She ran toward the dressing rooms, pursued by a swarm of cameras hungry for the fallout. I didn't feel the rush of joy I expected. I just felt ... light, as if a backpack full of stones had finally been cut from my shoulders. "And the winner of the global culinary crown is ... I began, turning toward the two chefs who actually deserved to be there. But as I announced the winner, I saw a notification flash on the monitor behind the host. A social media feed was scrolling. The hashtag Vera Lies was already trending #1 worldwide. The empire was collapsing in real time. After the cameras stopped rolling and the confetti was swept away, I sat alone at the judging table. The studio was dark now. Was it worth it? I looked up. It was Marcus. He looked tired but impressed. "I didn't do it for revenge, Marcus," I said, sliding my old notebook back into my pocket. "I did it for the food. You can't lie to a plate. The ingredients always know the truth." "What now, chef?" he asked. "You're the most famous woman in the world tonight. You've destroyed a legend and revealed yourself as the shadow chef." I looked at my scarred hands. "Now, I go back to my kitchen. But this time, I'm keeping the lights on." The aftermath of the culinary battle of the century was a global storm that lasted for months. The video of me revealing the truth went viral, garnering hundreds of millions of views. Sponsors dropped Vera Vance within 48 hours. Her cookbooks were pulled from shelves. And the Mama Vera brand became a textbook example of corporate and personal fraud. But I wasn't there to watch the wreckage. I returned to my restaurant in Paris, L'Alchemy. For the first week, the street was lined with paparazzi and curious fans. I kept the doors closed. I didn't want the fame that came from a scandal. I wanted the respect that came from a perfect service. One evening, a month after the finale, a small courier package arrived at the restaurant. Inside was a single, old, copper whisk and a legal document. It was a formal apology, written by my mother's lawyers, along with a deed to the house I grew up in. She had sold everything else to pay the legal fees and the breach of contract fines. She was moving to a small town in the countryside, disappearing from the public eye that had once been her oxygen. I didn't feel hate when I read the letter. I felt nothing but a quiet, hollow pity. She still couldn't say I'm sorry in her own handwriting. Even her remorse was a ghost-written script. I looked at the copper whisk, the one I had used, until my fingers cramped. I walked to the back of the kitchen and dropped it into the recycling bin. Some things are better left in the past, chef. My sous chef, Pierre, called out. The first table is seated. They are asking if the egg of truth is on the menu tonight. I smiled. The world had given my spherical omelette a new name. Tell them we're serving something better tonight, Pierre. We're serving the future. I had designed a new menu. It wasn't based on the recipes I had written for Vera. It wasn't based on the anger I had felt in Paris. It was based on light. Poached sea bass in a broth of spring herbs. Delicate lemon sorbets that tasted like a summer morning. And breads made from grains grown in soil that had never known a pesticide dod. As the night progressed, the rhythm of the kitchen took over. The clinking of pans, the hiss of the sear, the focused silence of a team that moved as one. This was my symphony. No cameras, no scripts, just the honesty of the heat. Near the end of the night, a young girl, perhaps 14 years old, came to the kitchen door. She was clutching a worn notebook of her own. Her father stood behind her, looking proud and a little nervous. Chef Rossi. She whispered, I watched the show. I want to be a chef like you. Not like the magazines, but like you. I knelt down so I was a level with her. I saw the flower on her apron and the look of pure, unadulterated passion in her eyes. I reached into my pocket and handed her my favorite paring knife, the one I'd used to win my second star. Don't be a chef like me, I told her softly. Be the chef that only you can be. Don't let anyone else take credit for your seasoning, and never let them tell you that your gift isn't real. The kitchen is the only place where you can't fake the truth. Guard that truth with your life. She took the knife as if it were a holy relic. Her smile was the brightest thing I had seen in years. After the last guest left and the kitchen was scrubbed to a mirror shine, I sat on the back steps of the restaurant, looking out at the Parisian skyline. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, a silver needle stitching the sky. I pulled out a fresh, blank notebook. On the first page, I didn't write a recipe for a fancy sauce or a complex foam. I wrote, Step 1, crack the egg. Step 2, don't be afraid of the fire. Step 3, breathe. You were finally home. The shadow chef was gone. In her place stood Elara, just Elara, and for the first time in my life, that was more than enough.